Welcome to Odoo Live. My name is Todd Farnham, Community Manager here at Odoo San Francisco. And joining me today is resident Odoo expert and business advisor Andre Tuefek to talk about manufacturing and MRP. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
No problem.
Cool. So today, if you're new, the format works like this. You will watch his amazing presentation for as long as it goes. Maybe we think, how long? Maybe 40 minutes or so?
Sure.
2 hours? We'll see. There's a lot to cover today. And afterward, we'll follow it up with a Q&A session. If you have any questions throughout, be sure to enter them to the right in the chat box, and we can either answer them there or save them for the end for Andre to answer throughout. Now, if you're new to Odoo live webinars, make sure that you guys do enter stuff in the chat box. And if you like this, be sure to like and subscribe, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and all that good stuff. All right, well, with that, without further ado, let's pass it off to Andre. Thanks,
All right,
man.
thanks, man. Okay, so manufacturing in Odoo. Where we want to start today is actually on the product level for a little bit. Everything we define there, from routes to bill of materials, etc., is going to inform everything that's happening in manufacturing. So I'm going to go into it via this application here. Hopefully familiar with kind of the home dashboard here. I'm just going to jump into products here. This is the same product table that you're going to access through inventory, through purchasing, through sales. The first thing you want to realize when we're looking at this is not just your finished goods. These are going to be, yes, those finished goods, but also your sub-assemblies, your components. Everything and anything that is going into the manufacturing, anything you're pulling in from vendors, it's all going to live here and be controlled through here. So I'm just going to pull up a random product to review a couple of things that we really want to touch on. So there's a lot going on here. There is already an inventory webinar up on our channel that goes into a lot of this in a lot more detail. I would highly recommend you watch that and get a good understanding of how inventory works before jumping into manufacturing. Inventory is a required application to run manufacturing as well. So not only should you know it, but you're going to need to know it to run the manufacturing piece. But what we really want to focus on here are a couple things. So the routing piece, which is really going to inform Odoo how something is made, lives here on the inventory tab on a product under routes. So manufacturer is basically going to tell, okay, I make this. Buy is something that you're going to get from a vendor. This is going to be something that's going to be maybe for your raw goods or any components that you get. Made to order is something you're going to layer a condition on either of these. So if this is something you only make when you get a confirmed sale for, or if it's a component that you only pull into stock when you need it to make something, you would layer it in this way. Now, what this is going to tie to are basically sales orders. Now, you can put a manufacturing in order in manually if you want, but ideally what you would like is one person in your organization to take an action, confirm a sale, and then have that trigger in a bunch of other moves throughout your organization. So one move, and then a bunch of other stuff happens, so there's no duplication of efforts, no re-entry of information, anything like that. And that's going to start here by defining these things on the routes. Now, this is going to apply again, not only to your finished goods, but also to all your components, your sub-assemblies. So if this was a sub-assembly, or a raw good, or a raw component, in your bill of materials, every single one of these, because remember, all those are going to live in here, you have to set your routes for that. Because when you trigger an MO, it's going to run through the bill of materials and say, okay, do we have what we need? It'll check the stock to have what you want to allocate it. If you don't have enough of it, it will check the route as to how you get or make more. If it's to make more of it, it'll put in an MO for the difference of that. If it's a buy, it'll create a purchase order to get the rest of it, to get the components you need to fulfill the order. If any of those are made to order, it'll then just mirror the total production number to either make the sub-assemblies needed to fulfill it or to get the components you need to fill that. So when a lot of other actions are getting kicked off by manufacturing order or a sales order triggering one, this here on the product level is where all that's coming from. Another thing here in traceability is also where this is going to live. So either serialization for your final products, lots as well, either for final products, but especially for components. We have another webinar that touches a lot on traceability and some of the quality pieces and purchase. But here, the idea is you'll be able to tie a lot, especially to your components or raw goods from the second you first receive them. So you get something from one of your vendors, the second you first actually have hands on it and eyes on the product, you'll assign a lot number to it, and that is going to live with that component throughout the whole process. So when it goes into inventory, when a new manufacturing order comes in, and you want to pull some of that inventory for a specific manufacturing order, it's going to ask you what lot and how much are you pulling. This kind of traceability won't let you do that operation without identifying the lot, so it kind of combats human error, let's call it, in terms of losing that traceability through the process. The idea here is you'll be able to, forward and backwards, understand what was used in what manufacturing order and where it ended up. So if, God forbid, a vendor issues a recall, you can look into which lots that applies to, which manufacturing orders you used those lots in, and then which final goods those produced, and which customers to reach out to and say, hey, we have to pull those back, and vice versa. If a bunch of customers come to you with the same product, the same issue, you're able to go back and say, okay, this one component is not working in this final product. Go back and see what manufacturing orders fulfilled those sales, what lots filled those manufacturing orders, and what vendor you got them from, and go back to them and say, hey, you sold me a faulty product or whatever the recourse is there. But again, that traceability, which we're going to run into when we actually execute a manufacturing order, lives there. So here as well, you're going to identify from this view, you can look at your BOMs as well. So if we look at, let's see here, a product that actually has a bill of materials on it. Let's look up our computer here. So over here on this tab, you're going to see your bill of materials right here. And if I open this up, a couple things here. So one, the type of BOM is where you want to start. So a traditional BOM manufactures this product. It's telling the system, look, I'm going to consume these products in a process. They're going to get, put together, change, whatever it is to make this final product. You could also make it a kit, basically telling them, look, when we sell this, it's not really going to go through a process. You're going to go grab these additional pieces, and it's all going to get shipped out. So when someone buys this, they actually get all these parts. Some people call it a phantom BOM, whatever you want, but this is that kitability is going to live through the bill of materials interface right here. Now, on all these components, even though these look like individual ones, if any of these have a bill of materials themselves, when Odoo kind of looks at this product in a manufacturing order and runs through this BOM, every level of that BOM is going to be run through. So for this graphics card, for example, if I open this up, and actually you can see here, it doesn't have its own BOM, but you can see what it's used in. This is really useful. If I look at this, if you have a very common component that's used in a bunch of different products, you can quickly see, all right, which from a component level of my finished goods or sub-assemblies is this piece tied to. Now, if I were to give this graphics card its own bill of materials, well, let's create one quickly. Let's say it's going to have, sure, why not? And let's give it another, sure, basic computer. Let's save that. And so now when I go back to the card itself, you can see now it has its own BOM. And now when I look at this, the BOM structure that we can look at right here, this is what Odoo essentially looks at and goes through when you put this order in. It's going to run through this whole structure and say, okay, we're making this. It's made up of these components. Okay, this component here, it has its own BOM, and it's made up of these components. And for every single one of these, it's going to check the routing that we looked at before. Do I make it? Do I buy it? Do I have some in stock? And it's going to take the kind of the math of how much you need to make one of these and run through and either create the necessary stock moves, manufacturing orders for your sub-assemblies, or purchase orders for anything that you're short on. And again, you can see how it kind of indents here again. That BOM tree, it's going to run through that as multi-level or as deep as your BOMs go. So that structure is going to be here kind of on the product level. And again, you can get this through anywhere you get into the product table, you can get it through here. Now the last piece here too as well that we want to look at the products before we kind of pivot into the actual manufacturing piece is the use of variants. So the ability to manage a product and have variants on that product. Meaning, for example, with this iPod, I have two different memories that it can come in, or let's say two different colors it could have. So instead of looking at this product and saying, well, for every combination, 16 white, 16 black, 32 gig white, 32 gig black, instead of each one of those combos being a separate product form out here, we're going to treat the iPod as one and just have variants on here. So this allows a couple things. One, the production to say, okay, well, it's going to be essentially the same routing and the same steps, but only a few things, maybe like an extra step or a different material to either add in a different color or to add in some more memory. This also allows you to control the pricing of it and layer different pricing on this. Being able to say, well, you know what, if someone orders this and I have to manufacture something that has twice the memory, I'm going to charge them more. And the same kind of logic for costing as well. Being able to say, well, this extra step or this extra material is going to cost me more, so then I'll be able to kind of reflect that cost in terms of building that out. Now, again, this is going to be all on your product level, and this is everything you want to do before you even kind of jump into the manufacturing piece at all. Now, once we actually have all that done, what you're able to do is come into your manufacturing orders here. Now, this is where your MOs are going to live wherever they come from. Again, you can create one here. You can have a sales order trigger one. You can even tie a reordering rule to have an MO get triggered to kind of replenish some stock if you always want to have a certain amount on hand. The point here is, this is kind of be your central repository of all the different manufacturing orders that you have. Now, when it comes to the manufacturing piece itself, there are a couple different ways you can do this. So there are different levels, for lack of a better term, of complexity or, let's say, kind of involvement or for your workers that you can have. So, for example, this first one here, this is probably our simplest one. This is saying, I just want to be able to go through a process. I don't have to have detailed instructions, or maybe it's at the end of an assembly line and it doesn't really make sense for every single operation you're doing to be logged as a work order. You just want to say, look, we're going to run a production, and at the end of the production, we're going to consume X and we're going to produce Y. So here, we're just saying, okay, we're going to take this raw material here and we're going to finish this product here. And all you want to do is be able to log the consumed materials and then update the inventory with the finished piece. Again, this is the simplest version of executing a manufacturing order. So if I hit produce here, it literally says, okay, well, I'm going to record the production of what I made. And what this does is it then consumes this and then creates this. You can post the inventory here, or you can hit mark as done, which also posts the inventory. And what that does is you can see the inventory moves here of kind of the raw good pulled out of stock and then the finished good put into stock. And this is really, again, just to record production. You're not interested in kind of time tracking, instruction steps for anything like that. This is a really simple interface. You can execute that and have kind of all the inventory moves captured. Now, something a little bit more kind of involved, if we take a look at building, let's say, this computer. So what you're going to do here is actually have work orders associated with it. This is going to be something you want to give instructions to. Maybe there are specs that you want to give to actually build this product, specific instructions. You want to be able to record time, have kind of a greater idea of cost analysis and things like that. So for anything like that, this is kind of the minimum level you're going to have to come in at and execute a manufacturing order with. So similar here, we're going to see what materials we're going to consume, what products we're expected to finish at the end. You can see this is already planned, which is another thing as well. These stages here, when a manufacturing order is generated, it'll be in a kind of confirmed state, but planned is going to tell it, okay, we're actually going to start doing this thing now. You can see that this is just confirmed, and this is now just in planned. So we're going to actually get this thing into progress now by getting into the work orders. So if I click into this, we're going to see a little bit where this comes from. But this is kind of an overview of, okay, this is the level of detail I can have when executing a manufacturing order. So you're going to have your work instructions here, your current production of what you're expected to do, and your time tracking. Your time tracking is going to start when you hit the Start Working button up here. Basically, someone's going to open this up, hit Start Working, and now you can see these buttons change, and there's going to be a live time tracking that's happening here. The point here is to have a further kind of both cost analysis of your time spent and your labor rate and your overhead rate, but also just kind of overall efficiency of where people are spending their time by product, by process, by worker. We're going to get to the reporting a little bit later, but this is where this time tracking is going to be pulling a lot of this information and tied to different other data points here. Now these buttons here, you're able to pause this for whatever reason. The point is to track fully productive time. This is if they stop for lunch, if this is going to carry over onto a couple of days, if it's a longer build, you're able to do that and kind of pick this up whenever you want. You can block this as well. giving this a loss reason. If equipment goes bad, if the material isn't available, whatever it is, you're able to block a work center right from this view as well. Now, assuming everything is kind of going along well, we're going to hit done here. What that's going to do is actually finish off this particular work order, and we can see it's in the finished stage here. When I go back to this work order, you can see that's in the finished status. If there were multiple work orders here, either this certain person, depending on how the workflow is set up, would either keep going and pick up the next work order, or it'd be moved to another work center and someone would pick up the second work order there. But once all those are done, we're going to see that all these work orders are finished. And again, I can mark this as done, which is going to post all the inventory, pull all that out in terms of the inventory moves, what was consumed and then what was produced. So we can see all this raw material and components were pulled out and consumed out of inventory, and then what was put in was this finished good here. Now here, by doing that as well, you get a cost analysis piece. So this is going to pull in two things. One, pulling from the BOM structure what we saw earlier. So this is the same thing, but now it's going to pull in the costs. These costs are being pulled from the actual bill of materials that we said earlier on the product form. And each individual one will have its own cost field. This is going to be not only the cost piece, but also the variance that we saw if you're using different variants of those different variance costs as well. So you can see how important the cost control aspect is to give you kind of a good half, if you will, of your cost analysis. The other piece is your operational piece. Now we're going to get into setting up the different work centers and routings in a second, but here we're going to see where we're going to place this information, but it's going to take that cost per hour that we're going to set in a little bit, and it multiplies it by that actual time capture, and it's going to give you your total cost here. It's going to put those two together and give you two things. One, it's going to give you a total cost for your entire manufacturing run for this MO, in this case, manufacturing run number 1, and it's going to give you a per unit breakdown as well. Now again, this is pulling from a lot of different places. Here, mostly in inventory, and here we're going to get into some of the more advanced kind of routing things and setups in a second. And to do that is a good kind of Odoo 101 lesson. So when you're looking at Odoo, and if you're not seeing something, if you're not seeing an option you want, I'd say 80% of the time, you're going to want to come into configuration, then settings. In here, you're going to find a lot of options, not just for manufacturing, but let's say I went to inventory, see more options here. Purchase, on the purchase side, see more options here. You'll notice that by default, a lot of these are off. What I'm going to turn on right now, work orders are quality in our MPS. The point being here is that we want the system kind of at a base level when you start. I want you to kind of learn what it does out of the box initially, and then learn to walk, run, then sprint. The other part is everyone is different, and not everyone needs all this functionality. The ability to keep it light and keep it clean keeps the UI and the UX really simple, especially when you're on a fabrication space or on a production floor. You're able to minimize and focus what your individual workers are looking at, what your floor managers are looking at, to get a clear, concise view of what they're doing, where they're supposed to be doing it. And again, I know with some other manufacturing softwares out there, it's a lot of information all at once, but again, we want to keep it really light. And what we're turning on now is the ability to set up different routings, work centers, work orders, and have our master production schedule as well. Now, the master production schedule, we'll look at it a little bit at the end, but we have a webinar that, I can't remember if it's one that's past or the one that's coming up, that we'll take a deeper dive into it, but we do want to highlight, that's a functionality that we have here. So now if we go back to our manufacturing orders, you're still going to see this view of all my MOs. However, you're going to see a bunch of other views we can see, and if I go to my dashboard here, this is looking at the same information, but a totally different way. Instead of sitting in a seat and saying, okay, here are all the full manufacturing orders I have on the floor made up of X amount of work orders, I want to see basically what's going on at each one of my separate workstations, regardless of what, a work order or anything that's happening there. So where these are coming from, if I go to my master data here, you'll see our products, our bill of materials. The first thing we're going to set up is our work centers. These are the individual places that the work is happening, and from that we can set up our routings. So let's take a look at our work centers here. I'm going to grab one of these. So a couple different things you want to highlight here. Really the most important is your cost per hour. This is where the number came from in our cost analysis. This is your labor rate of someone executing that operation, and the overhead combined into that to give you your cost per hour of performing that job at that work center. Now, a bunch of the other information that's going to get pulled in there by that kind of different controls we had while someone's actually executing a work order, being able to track it, pause it, start it, scrap it, kind of gets captured up here. So you're going to see things like lost time. This one's really useful, not only from a work center kind of perspective, but just an overall routing and efficiency perspective. You can see here that we lost this many minutes, for this reasons at this work center, and you can see who did it as well. So a couple of things I would take away from this. One, if my loss reason keeps being the same thing, equipment failure, okay, there's something happening at assembly station 1. It requires, our maintenance team to go in and maybe we have to buy a new piece of equipment. Maybe we need to fix something or change the way we're doing something. If it's constantly material availability, then what's going on, with my logistics team and my supply team being able to bring things to the floor when they're needed. Now, the other thing, too, is you're going to see it by user. And, if they're spread across, it's a bunch of different people, okay, but if you keep seeing the same person over and over again, that's a good way to identify, a labor issue. Maybe there's, one of the workers just really isn't up to speed of where they're supposed to be. If it's the same loss reason, okay, maybe they don't know how to use the equipment, or maybe they don't know where something is. So it gives you insight both on the materials level, the equipment's level, and kind of your labor level. Now, once you have your different work centers set up, what we're going to do is set up a routing. Now, routing is going to be tied to, every product, and we're going to see how we tie to that. But this is essentially telling Odoo, okay, how do I make something? And let's see if we can pull one up that has a couple steps on it here. Let's try custom assembly line. Okay, so here, what we're telling it is, okay, for this routing, what I call custom assembly line, I literally want you to go to this station and do this thing, and then go to this station and do this thing, and then go to this station and this thing. And you can make this as long as details as you want. What's going to live on here is literally telling them, okay, this is what you're doing. This is the work centers that we just were looking at that I want you to do it at. This is where it is in the sequence. And the operational piece, this is to decide kind of if you want, okay, I want you to do everything in your batch essentially, and then move it to the next work center, or once you hit a minimum number out of that, you can start basically shipping it down the line. Flexibility to kind of set that up how you want. And then here, you can do one of two things. One, you can say, look, I expect this to take you this long. I like more of the compute based on real time. And you can pick what the average that you want to set here be, 10, 20, 30. You can set how long you expect it to take, and then it will actually track how long it's actually taking people to execute it and give you an average time. Really useful in terms of kind of seeing not only for your production piece, is it landing where you think it's supposed to land, but is it getting better, is it getting worse over time, and you can dig into kind of why is that happening. Here on the worksheet as well, this is where our instructions that we saw briefly before are going to live. Now, we also have steps that are going to be related to those. We're going to come back to this view in a little bit to see, okay, if you want to get detailed with steps, this is where we're going to set that up as well. Now, the routes, once those are set, you're going to tie these to a product. Routes can have multiple products tied to them. So if I go to any bill of materials, and this is where you're going to tie them, as you can see the routing over here. So if I see this laptop here, I'm telling it, okay, this product is made up of these components, and to make one, it goes through this routing right here. And again, this is on the bill of materials, same interface that we saw earlier. Now, to see kind of all that in a really detailed manufacturing order, and this is going to be probably the most detailed level of both complexity, of holding someone's hand, of really getting in there and saying, okay, this is a specific way to do this. This is going to be anything from a specific technical execution of on a piece of hardware they have to do, or some really custom specs that came in and they have to be done in exactly this order, or maybe there's just a legal requirement you have to do X, Y, Z in a row for it to produce what you want. Once we hit plan, this is going to move that into progress and generate our work orders. Here, it's going to be similar interface into our actual work order, but now when I hit process, it's going to take us to a totally different view. So behind the scenes here, that time tracking is happening. That same button that we saw before, it's already been activated by hit process, so that live time tracking is happening right now. And now the first thing you're going to see is we are on a very detailed level of instructions here. So these are the ideas behind steps. So here we're saying, okay, please use this specific tool. Okay, I did that. Let's go to next. And that's literally the idea here is I'm going to go step by step by step. And there's a bunch of different functionality you can layer in here. So here they want to enter the table serial number. Okay, so we're going to do that on the fly right here. Perfect. And now, for instance, here it says, okay, we're going to take a picture. Sure, no problem. So here what we're going to do is we're going to throw in, sure, let's go this one right here. We have a picture, validate that. And you can see the different kind of steps that are happening here. So that could be a record step. you could have this. This is a very simple quality pass-fail step saying, is this in good condition? Quality you'll see as a separate icon on your dashboard in terms of an application, but its actual functionality isn't going to behave like going into inventory or manufacturing or sales or anything like that. Its actual functionality is going to be layered in different operations across your production. When you receive a good, you want to do a quality check in the middle of a manufacturing operation like this, and this is a good representation of how that looks. So let's say I pass that here. This is another quality check here, but this one is a specific measurement one. So basically you would identify, and here on this one you would identify what the norm is and what your tolerance is. So if 90 degrees was my norm, let's say, and your tolerance was, I don't know, half a degree either way. So if anything was less or more than half a degree here, it would essentially fail the quality check. Let's validate that as well. Here then we're going back to specific instructions on how to do something. Again, you can see how specific we are in terms of our instructions here. Here we're identifying a lot. So here now we're all of a sudden bringing our traceability that we talked about earlier right into the production. So now I'm going to create this lot number. And again, once I've done that, this is going to live with this finished good before. So this is a good example we talked about before in terms of lot traceability. I bought, let's say, these table legs from a vendor. And now I'm making a finished good, this table here, and now I'm identifying the lot that I'm using in this production here. So if someone gets this table and let's say the legs break, I'm able to go back, see the sales order, see the manufacturing order, and from right here see the lot that I used for those table legs, and I can reach out to that vendor and say, hey, those legs you sold me, those weren't any good. So we validate this. Now at the end you're going to get this. You're going to see all the steps here. If there were any not done, if there were any issues, we can mark that as done here. And this view here, now we are going to be back at our different work orders. If there was another work order in the queue, that person who's at one of these stations is going to pick up that work order and keep going. So with steps, you can see how detailed you're going to get and where those actual different steps came from. If I go into one of these, again here, on these we had our PDF, but then what I'm going to detail those is right here on steps. Let's see if we have, let's see, assemble furniture. Let's take a look at the ones we just saw. So we can see these different steps right here. So you can see here a couple different options. One, what product you're working on, what product variant, if you want, you're working on, what your operation is, because this is technically set up kind of like a quality check. And then here, you're going to see how we can identify exactly which worksheet to go to and what to do. Now, this is going to be flexible enough to be able to execute, let's say, measure the angle. And here, we can see that this is a measure type test type. We can see what our norm is and what our tolerance is. I guess in this case, their tolerance is essentially this range, so a tolerance of 4 degrees total, plus or minus 2. And you can see kind of that piece here as well. And this is where you're going to build out those very specific instructions tied to the worksheets that you're pulling in. Now, for all these, there's no right or wrong way to do these. It's up to you to have the flexibility to both mirror, the need of your workers on the floor, to have specific instructions and workflows, the ability to, actually mimic your physical space here in Odoo. So when you're looking at your floor, you can turn and look at a screen and see essentially the same setup here and what's going on at each space, or from a higher level, seeing where we stand with different manufacturing orders at any time. Now, the reporting piece here. So actually, once you've already done a lot of this stuff, there's a couple things you can come in here and report on. So there are two different really kind of reporting tools in Odoo. So you're going to have our reporting piece here, which is going to be kind of a pivot table piece, which we'll look at in a second. But here, if I hit this magnifying glass, I'm going to get my group by and filter by tools. So if I shut this filter off, I'm looking at all my manufacturers I have in the system, whether they're done, in progress, whatever they are. Now, when I click on group by or filter by, when I have these fields here, these tools are ubiquitous in Odoo. It doesn't matter if you're in accounting, sales, inventory, you're going to have those tools available to you, but what you can select is reflective of what you're working in. So each one of these options are fields on a manufacturing order. So if I go into these, every single one of these fields here, product, quantity produced, bill of material, operation type, deadline start, etc., are going to be fields I can select here. So, if I want to look at this and I want to see, I want to see these by start date, I can very quickly do that. Maybe I want to do it by start date and I want to do it by product and status. So I can do that, say, okay, in February I had these 4, build these products, and what's their status for each? Or I can flip that. Maybe I don't like the way that looks. I want to say, okay, I want to see this by status and by product. Let's say I get 3 done, 1 in progress. Okay, and what did I make? Doesn't matter how you want to do that. You can do start date here as well and have an additional drill down in each. For any of these that you build that you like, you'll be able to favorite these and say MO by status. And so anytime you come back into this view and you quickly want to run that same report, whatever production report you can have multiple of these, you're able to pull in that view. And again, it's not a static one. It's running an active filter on the data there. So as the data behind it changes, your results are going to change here. The other kind of reporting you can do here in the pivot table, if you want to take a look, let's say manufacturing orders, have our graphical view here. And this is, again, going to be familiar with anyone that's familiar with the pivot table. Let's say our quantity and our total count. And again, you have your same fields here. So let's say I want to see it by product, and let's say I want to see it by, let's say materials availability. See what's available and what's waiting. And you can drill down into that as well and say I want to see it by, operation type. So you can build these and kind of keep drilling as you want if you want in this view as well. Or again, like I said, back on your manufacturing orders, be able to use the fields here. Now, in all of this, if there is something, let's say on a manufacturing order level that you want to capture that you're not seeing, this is where our studio tool comes in really handy. So maybe there's a PO, a purchase order associated with this manufacturing order that you want to be able to link this to. I'm going to open Studio right here. And again, this is our Studio tool, allows you to customize the database quite a bit, essentially allows you to execute changes that would require coding without having to know any code or use that interface. Simple drag and drop. So I'm going to grab a many to one field right here. What I'm going to do is search more. In the middle, you're going to have what, layman's terms, just plain English, what something is. And then over here, Odoo speak, the model name, what it calls it. So now I'm going to go find, let's say, a purchase order right here. I'm going to confirm that. And what it's doing now is actually adding a field where I drop down, I can go in, let me close this, and select an existing purchase order in the system. So here, say, okay, I know that purchase order number 5 was related to this manufacturing order. Because it's many to one, you can see it's essentially a hyperlinked piece of information. So I can drill in and get into purchase order number 5 and see exactly what we're talking about here. So with Studio, again, this is a small example, but when you're looking at stuff and you want to change what you see or what's available to you, you're able to use Studio to do that. And that's going to affect your reporting as well. I'm trying to circle back to that. Because remember, when we're looking at our group by and our filter bys, these are fields that are available to us. So I just added a purchase order to this. So I'm going to pull these up. And now when I go into what fields I have available, I now have purchase order, the field we just added. So now I can group these by purchase order that are associated with that. So that same logic, for whatever you want to add to this view, you're able to then add to it and then kind of cut up the data by that way as well. Now, a couple of things before, I want to make sure we leave a little time for Q&A towards the end, but here, what we want to be able to do is, there's some other things that, kind of planning pieces here that I want to touch on. We don't have time to kind of get into the detail today. I want to make sure everyone knows that we have. So a couple things. One, master production schedule, being able to forecast demand and kind of be ahead of your inventory demand, both on the component level and raw goods level, to make sure you're getting what you need in time to meet your production demands. Here as well, you're able to look at your work orders and your manufacturing orders in two different ways. So one, you can see very quickly, well, what am I waiting for anything right here in terms of materials that are needed. And then here, that would be orders to plan, basically waiting for things to get executed. What I really like are looking at a work order level. So this is going to be the same kind of information, but two different views, up to you how you want to see it. So here, what we have is by production, so essentially by manufacturing order. And what we're looking at is that table assembly line, and you'll be able to kind of see, okay, what the specific drill down steps are in here, kind of the stage of it as well, be able to drag that just like that to kind of push that into a different time frame. Or we can kind of flip that on its head and be able to look at this by work center instead. This is going to mimic the view before of, do I want to look at this by my full orders, or do I want to look at what's happening on the floor by a work center spot? And so you can see that at these different assembly stations, what's going to tell you is what's going on, how much time is it eating up, and for what overall order is manufacturing order is this rolling back up into. Yeah, I think that's kind of the majority of what we want to cover here. I know there's probably a bunch of questions because the manufacturing has a lot to it. Everyone's is very unique, but really what I want to stress here is the flexibility and the ability to be able to mimic both your own physical space, the ability to have the level of control and detail you want on the floor and when executing a work order, a manufacturing order, and the ability to kind of pull in studio and have this kind of connect to other parts of the system as well in terms of a little bit of customization work. Okay, I'm sure we got a couple questions, so let's start pulling some of those in, and what we got?
Cool. So awesome. First of all, thanks. Amazing presentation, Andre. And as he did mention, this is MRP is one of our more complex systems, so a lot of your specific instances and use cases would be best solved for one-on-one demos. And I put Andre's meeting link in the description, so if you'd like to have him explain a little bit more to you directly, that's a great source for that.
Sure.
Now, our first question, we kind of answered this, but I think it'd be good to go over. Matt Fasola asked, maybe going into it anyway, but he'd be interested in how to do a specific, customize their routing and the various parts of your manufacturing setup.
Okay, so again, all our routing piece here, and routing is a word that you got to be a little careful with in Odoo because routes, that word gets used a couple times. So the first route you're going to set is on that product level, being able to tell the system, okay, how do I make or buy more of this? And then once that's set, being able to come in here and create this routing of, okay, well, this is actually the physical process I go through to make something. So this routing is going to be separate from the routing you set there. So the first route you set is, okay, I make it, and that's on the product form. And the next route you're going to go through is, okay, if I make it, which specific routing do I want to use to make that actual product? So those are kind of the two main routes you have to set for any manufacturing order to get executed.
Awesome. And then the next question is from Jerome Thurall. He asked, can Odoo handle changes in the bill of materials during the production? Now imagine if you've got a manufacturing order with one product that takes a whole month to make. The production has been going on for a week, then the customer asks for changes mid-production. What are your thoughts?
So that is going to be something kind of on a more advanced level that we can get into another time, but the ability to kind of change basically here, you're going to set what you expected to consume and what you expected to produce. And as you go through that, if that changes, you're able to change what you actually consumed and what you actually produce. That's going to be the base level of being able to change what happens on a production level. Being able to actually edit the BOM is going to be more kind of like BOM revision, having multiple BOMs, which is more kind of in our PLM space. But that's a little bit more, I guess, not reactive, as this question is, that in the middle of it something needs to change versus changing a BOM kind of in the sense of how Odoo looks at it, the definition of a product, which is a kind of a larger project management or product management question. But the ability to say, look, well, we end up having to pull in, I actually consumed a different amount of these, or I actually made a different amount, you're able to change that during the production piece, because that stems from the kind of simple use case, not even as this one, but let's say I grabbed, 4 of these table legs and I broke one. Then I ended up consuming 5. So it stems from that simple kind of idea of, well, I ended up using different materials and producing a different amount. So kind of layer that to, well, we have a change now during that. I'm going to pull in some different materials and produce something a little different. You can do that. But overall, the actual definition of that BOM on a long-term basis, that's kind of a different process that we're going to go through. And I think we have a more detailed kind of PLM and kind of BOM revision and management in a larger sense. Not on the fly, but in a larger sense for a company. I think is another webinar we're going to kind of dive into and take some more time to explore.
Sounds great. Cool. And then we do have a couple more questions, so let me just get to that. So Matt elaborated. He said, he's looking for the inventory to be picked up with the stock first.
Yep.
And then can send it to the workshop.
Sure. So that's going to come to warehouses and locations. This is going to be a little bit more on the inventory side. Again, we have some webinars on this. But here, what we're going to be able to do is you're going to set up your different locations first. So you're going to have different locations in your warehouse that are going to be, and even if it's a production piece, it's okay. You have internal locations which basically are defined as places that we're going to record our stock at. You can have external locations as well, if I kind of take that filter off. And depending on how you want to do it, you can have either internal or external, meaning it's all really about inventory allocation. If something's an internal location, Odoo's still going to recognize it as for use. So what you could have is a route that's going to move something from general inventory to a production location. You can see that right here, a virtual location called production. Why this is important is if I have, and I'm going to jump to a product for a second. If I have, whatever, these keyboards right here, I have 22 on hand. This is by internal location. So this is what the system thinks is available to consume, sell, etc. You want to set your production location as something that's non-internal, so when they actually go in and pull it out of there, it moves it to that spot, and it won't be, recognized by the system as available for future use. You would set up that by kind of different, more advanced routings that, again, you can set those routes, those different operations, and I believe my colleague Brett did a very good webinar on kind of taking a lot of time to go into detail those, but you would set that route up to basically go in and say, okay, go to this internal location here. Let me go back to our locations here for a second. Pull from stock the materials I need. It will reduce the amount you have on hand, which lets Odoo know that essentially it's allocated. It's not available for other consumption. It's not available for sale. And it's going to move it to a location. In this example, I think we have one again set up as, excuse me, as a virtual location. And that's a location where you can look into, you can see what's there, and that is where your MO is basically going to pull from. So it's going to rely on that inventory location for inventory and supply, and you keep kind of a wall between what's allocated and what's available for, again, future production or for sale. But again, we'll make sure to link to the webinar that goes into that a lot more detail, since I could spend another half hour kind of walking through those specific routes and how to set that up. But that's the idea here, is to be able to delineate between the two.
Perfect. Cool. And now we've got one last question, and this one is a little bit of a specific use case, so maybe you could step out and kind of try to apply it generally. It's pretty complicated, but it's from Adele.
Okay.
He said, do we need to have the manufacturing app if we are using BOM for services company? For example, let's say we're selling live animals that we're shipping, so in order to ship them, we have to first conduct a blood test.
Okay. So yes. So just from a functional standpoint, the first thing we want to make sure everyone understands is if I go to a product form here, and I want to have this tab that says bill of materials, you need manufacturing. You need that application in Odoo to have this here. If you don't have MRP, this option won't here. You won't be able to build a BOM, build a kit, whatever it is. So that's tied to that. Now, for this specific use case, if all you're going to do, well, it depends really how you want to define the product. If a BOM for a services company, if your good is a live animal, that live animal is going to be made up of components or something. If you're going to have it to conduct,
projects maybe might be better.
A blood test, yeah. If it's more, this seems more like a question about the ability to use manufacturing for basically work orders and manufacturing orders, being, okay, I have to go do this action. And that's going to be really related to work orders and manufacturing orders, not your BOM. So that's a good idea. So you could use project, and essentially, this is kind of taking a little bit of deviation, but I could say, well, I'm just going to create these tasks and have them be my work orders, if you will, and each project be a manufacturing order. Just something off the top of my head. But I don't think you need the bill of materials for that, because if your finished good is, an animal, then you have to do some things about that. It's not like that thing's going to be comprised of anything else. So chances are you probably don't need that bill of materials, but that brings up a good point for anyone asking, saying, well, maybe I don't need a full manufacturing piece, but I just want to walk through inventory or only some light manufacturing. That bill of materials functionality is 100% tied to manufacturing right here. You don't have this, then when you go into inventory, your BOM structure and all that will not be there.
Cool.
Okay.
And that's actually all the questions that we've got for today. As Andre mentioned, this is, let me get this going. All right. Cool. Thanks, everybody. So as Andre mentioned today, there's a lot of different other webinars that that work really well to enhance your understanding of what MRP can do? You know, some of the ones you mentioned were inventory.
100% watch inventory first. Again, we went into some details here, but just like at the end, talking about routes, setting up warehouses, setting up locations, setting up those routes for stock moving around. We have a full webinar, I think it's called like advanced routing or using warehouse routes in Odoo. That's where you're gonna want to spend a bunch of time doing that. For that great question we had about, how does it go pick my stuff, and how do where does it come from and where does it go to end up here in the manufacturing piece, from kind of an inventory standpoint. So definitely spend time with that. On the product level, understanding setting up your routing, how you want to tell Odoo, how do I make or get more of it, what do I want to trigger those actions, and then spend some time, again, on understanding how to build in your components, your sub-assemblies, and then you can kind of build out your bill of materials. So I would definitely start with inventory 100%. For more advanced users, we have a couple studio ones out there, being able to customize a little bit like I did, and kind of change that around. And I believe we have a PLM one as well, I think, out there as well that kind of talks about that. I believe my colleague Sebastian did that, and it's really, really good. He's very, very knowledgeable about that. So if you want to kind of take a look at, BOM revision, product, iteration, stuff like that over time, that's a really good, piece as well. It's kind of a strong addendum to the manufacturing piece.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that pretty much concludes our transmission for today. If you, as mentioned before, if you like this webinar, found it useful, be sure to like and subscribe down below or in the corner here. And also, if you guys have any additional questions that are unrelated to this, or if you are outside of the U.S. and Canada, you can direct those to me, Todd, at webinars@odoo.com. As always, so many of these MRP cases are so instance and case specific that it would be best to actually work with Andre one-on-one. And I included his demo link in the YouTube description, so you can click on it at any time there. If you want to visit this YouTube video again, this is a permanent link, so you can just revisit it there. And with that, thank you so much for your time. Andre, excellent job. Thank you so much. And have a great day. So
Thanks, everybody.
Signing off.